Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this lovely sunny morning in Sacramento, California? As you can tell, I'm from California. That thick Californian accent from Edinburgh, Scotland. In case anybody's wondering where the accent from, it's actually from Edinburgh in Scotland. But I've been in Colorado now for the last 17 years, so the accent's softened a little bit, which I think is advantageous in as much as people can actually now understand me, generally speaking. So that can be helpful when you're communicating. But appreciate everybody taking the time to join this morning. My name's Andrew Moore. I work for Intel. I'm in our sales and marketing group, and the organisation that I represent, we essentially engage with large enterprise and government. So think Fortune 1000, large government, etc. The style of engagement we have is quite consultative in nature, but what we essentially do is really share best practice on what we see organisations doing to leverage in cool, new, innovative ways the latest technologies with a view to creating some form of competitive differentiation in a market that clearly is changing rapidly all around us, whether you're an enterprise or a state or local government. I also spend the majority of my time with what we call the strategic accounts. That's a small subset of the customers we call upon. They are typically large, global, technologically progressive companies in retail, banking, insurance, utilities, oil and gas, telecommunications, transportation, etc. What I do with them is I kind of cast the futures net a little bit wider, so look at what's coming down the pipe 5+ years from now. And while I said before that part of what we try to do with customers is help them create some form of competitive differentiation, what I do with a small subset that I work with closely is the anchor for the engagement is really around digital transformation, which is really kind of the theme of what I'm going to talk about today. So I spend a lot of my time traveling on planes, meeting with these customers globally. So what I'm going to share with you today are really, I would say, some observations based on millions of miles and hundreds of conversations with large global companies and governments across the globe in terms of really what's going on. What are some of the disruptive factors affecting businesses and governments globally? What's the impact and implication to them? And also, how are they responding to a world where you can't avoid changing? Unless you want to be a dinosaur or the next chapter in somebody's book because you couldn't respond fast enough, how are folks responding to a world where we have to have this inevitable shift to digital? Normally I use this as my closing slide, but I brought it up front for a reason, because I think it underscores and amplifies folks the nature and magnitude of the change that we're all going through right now. And these are all fairly recent statistics, and I use them just to kind of provoke a little bit of thought to some extent. But if you look at that very top one, and I realise and appreciate that this may sound a little bit more businessy than government, but if you look at but I know that there's a fairly significant implication on the stuff that you guys do as well at the state of California level. By the end of next year, so in about 18 months or so from now, 2/3 of Global 2000 CEOs will have digital transformation as a cornerstone of their corporate strategy. And that's not fixing a bunch of IT problems, that's pretty disruptive, profound, board-level stuff. It's a big change in the market from what I've seen. Another one that's maybe interesting, 45% of the companies that were in the Fortune 500 10 years ago are not there today. And by the way, that number's growing. And you ask yourself the question, why not? What have they not done? And one of the things they've not done is change fast enough. They could not respond to a market that's being disrupted by a lot of the unicorns that we're all familiar with these days. The average age of a company used to be 60. By the end of the decade, it'll be 12. In other words, it would take large enterprise 50, 60 years. And by the way, Intel's in this bracket too. We're about 50 years old. It took us a long time to develop a brand reputation, a portfolio of products, and different routes to market to grow and diversify a business. By the end of the decade, the average age of a company will be 12. So you think about the companies that will be 12 by the end of the decade, that a lot of the unicorns, Kickstarter, Odesk, Liquid Space, Uber, Airbnb. If you're in the board of executive of one of those large organizations that has this brand reputation over the last 10, 50, 100 years, etc., you've got to be sitting there thinking, holy smokes, what do? How do I avoid being another statistic? I have to be on the front foot, and I have to accelerate my approach to to disruption. Another one that I think is interesting, and I know that you guys are thinking about this from a state of California perspective. By the end of the decade, half the workforce is going to be millennials. Millennials, by their nature, have a very different set of expectations of what work is and what work is not. And what this really talks to, it's like workplace transformation, but what it talks to is developing and acquiring and retaining the right skills for the future. If as an organization or a government you can't bring in the right people, and I don't just mean millennials, I mean the right people across the generational gaps, because I think about myself, somebody, some white guy in his mid-40s, I think I'd still add some value. So I think I can contribute, but I think, aggregating the productivity across the generational gaps and doing it in a way where you can actually attract that talent, I think is a very, very, very important factor in pursuing a path of transformation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The last one, fairly recently, a recent study, and I think this is both exciting and terrifying. Within the next 10 years, the work of as many as 140 million knowledge workers will be done by cognitive robots. Again, that's exciting for some, terrifying for others, because we move from the third industrial revolution to the fourth industrial revolution. Old jobs go, new jobs come in. Are you set up for success, whether you're in government or in a business? So what I'm painting there, folks, to some extent, is a picture of change, turbulence, and disruption, if you like, but disruption of a digital nature. And what you see here, and there's two sides to this coin, there's a business side and a government side. What you see here, at a macro level, I think there are a number of enablers or inhibitors of growth, depending on your point of view. And I'll cover the government one in just a second, but when I go through this, you'll understand what I'm getting at. And these are happening and being encountered by literally every single large enterprise that I talk to in different industries globally. Number one, it says business efficiency and agility. In other words, save money, respond quickly. Because if you don't, somebody else will. Somebody you've probably never even heard of before, and they'll do it better, faster, cheaper than you. And if that takes place, you're on the back foot. You're the one that's being disrupted and not the one that's doing the disrupting. That's not the side of the coin you want to be on. Number two says data. I have a viewpoint that I think you'll get is that these days all roads lead to data in some way, shape, or form. Data has essentially become the raw material for the information age. But the angle here is really around protection of data, security, trust, privacy, etc., which is important for a business. It's also crucially important for a government as you look to protect the assets and data of your citizens, etc. The thing I think that amplifies this further is we are all moving into this world where everything is connected. When you look at the numbers like 10 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion, a gajillion, bajillion connected devices by the end of the decade. As that takes place, so goes the rise of things like regulation, compliance, things like data sovereignty. So where do you physically have to have the data in order to run your business, do the business, etc. This is a very, very complex, gnarly, costly, and time-consuming problem around managing your risk. Most customers I talk to say, can I have the proverbial easy button? Just press it, and everything goes away, and, that's great. And as I said to some customers yesterday, if I had been able to invent that, I wouldn't be standing here. I'd be sitting on my island thinking about which golf course to play and which brand of single malt whiskey I want to have for, later in the evening for medicinal purposes. So that's my, my subtle Scottish humour, such as it is. Maybe I should just stick to the day job. So the first two around, save money and manage risk. And that's not unique. We've been doing stuff like that for a while. The third one, I think, is particularly interesting because if you're trying to transform your business, you've still got to grow. Got to grow the business, got to make revenue, got to diversify, etc. The forces that are disrupting here, folks, are really around some of the new economy of business models. The one that we all understand best is, the shared economy, Uber, etc., where it's based on the simple principle of having access to something versus actually physically owning it, which is completely different to the business models that a lot of the established businesses that I work with and you serve grew up being successful with. So, and I'll mention this later, but, you think about Uber. A fully shared car in the kind of Uber context, every fully shared car in the Uber context costs the automotive manufacturers $300,000 in lost revenue. So about 10 cars. So if you're the guys in charge of, Hyundai, GM, Ford, etc., what on earth do you do if you've got that level of disruption happening in your market? How do you change the business model so that you're on the front foot again and not being disrupted? There are a few others, and I'll touch on them a little bit, but that's causing massive disruption in the market as other companies look to try and figure out how do I grow and diversify. The last one is something we actually have slightly less control over, which is, and again, you guys know this better than me, is the slight variability, slight being, maybe an undercalling it, variability of the macroeconomic environment that we're in. So those are the from a business perspective, that's what it looks like. What I said there, I think, resonates with yourselves. If I was to try and put that into, more government type of speak, you're looking at things like the very rapidly changing nature of citizen expectations. the imperative to create digital opportunities and an infrastructure that will help you deliver the right services, attract, develop, and retain new businesses, etc. Dealing, obviously, with the constant challenges of economic and social development. Amplification of policy at the state and local level, and obviously the need to continue to drive a spirit of innovation and competitiveness across the state of California. And again, none of these things are particularly trivial. These are all difficult. One thing I would say is that when we look at change and transformation, often folks say, it's all about technology. Technology is my salvation. I'm like, no, it's not. Technology helps. But technology ultimately is the least of your problems. When I talk to customers, what I say is, look, technology can help you. And yes, in terms of being a digital business or an e-government, technology is at the foundation level. But unless you're organized for success, so organization, and have a culture that lets you drive it from the top down, it's just not going to happen. So people often ask, how do I do it? I know I have to transform, but where do I start? Technology, yes, but more importantly, organization and culture are two of the critical success factors in making it real. I'm going to skip a couple of these things here. These were really just a quick snapshot on, when I said business efficiency and agility and security, etc. What I wanted to share with you a little bit, and there's a reason for doing this, is the disruption around the new economy of business models. So again, the one that I think is best understood is the shared economy. So instead of staying at the nice Hyatt Regency next door last night, I could have stayed in Airbnb. I could have taken Uber to the conference center here. I could have used some liquid space accommodation to do some prep work. I could have used Kickstarter funds to get some specialist expertise from Upwork. I could have dined out at Feastly. I could have paid for it all using Lending Club. For most people, when I say that, it's like, that sounds a bit weird. Doesn't seem natural, right? And I think in that regard, folks, people thought that the sharing economy was kind of a passing fad, one of those things that was here today, gone tomorrow. It's not. So an example, Airbnb. Most of us have probably stayed in an Airbnb accommodation. I know I certainly have. Today, they have about 1.5 million rooms, maybe 1.6, in about, 147 countries worldwide, something like that. Their valuation has gone from $2.5 billion to about $27.5 billion in the last 3 years. By most measures, they are bigger than the established brands, Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton, Westin, etc. So if you're one of the folks running one of those established brands, you've got to be sitting there looking at it thinking, holy smokes, what do I do to get back on the front foot and create an experience for my customers that they want? Because I am being disrupted by companies like Airbnb. The other one that, again, we all know of is Uber. That's probably one of the biggest and best known of the unicorns, as they're called. They're about 7 years old. So remember what I said before about by the end of the decade, the 12-year-olds versus the 6-year-old type thing. So founded in 2009, got about 1,000 real employees. Operations actually in about 66 countries now. I should update that. The valuation is kind of cartoon-sized proportions. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Travis Kalanick reckons he's just getting started. So just this year alone in Europe, he believes that Uber will plan to take 400,000 personal vehicles off the road and create 50,000 jobs in Europe just this year. To amplify the point that I made before, a survey from Barclays that was done about 9 months ago says that with shared autonomous vehicles could reduce new car sales by up to 40% over the next 25 years. So that begs the question, again, if you're one of the folks running one of these big established automotive companies, what do you do? Have we reached peak car? Which is, why I said that, a fully utilized Uber or shared car costs each and every automotive manufacturer about $300,000 in lost revenue. So this is not trivial stuff. That said, these unicorns have had a fairly meteoric rise to fame, fortune, and in some cases, notoriety. I know that that's certainly the case in California here. And they're going as they grow up, let's say, into adolescence. I often wonder what do they become? And if you haven't read the article in time, it's maybe about 11 months old or so. It still makes interesting reading. Strangers crashed my car, ate my food, wore my pants. Tales from the sharing economy. So it's an interesting but rather disturbing look at the evolution that these unicorns are going through. But as they go through it, and I know this is a hot debate in California, they are going through growing pains, right? Regulation, concerns about public safety, compliance, data protection, data privacy, etc.
one of the questions I ask myself is, as they grow up, what do they become? Do they start to look like an established business, right? Or do they forge a new path? I'm not quite sure right now. A lot depends on some of the policies that are put in place at the state and local level, that type of thing. But it will be interesting to see how these folks develop over the next 5 to 10 years. I mentioned that the sharing economy is one. It's one of several. So let me kind of just give you a quick rundown on some of the other ones that are also creating levels of disruption. I would say that there's some general fuzziness on the definitions, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if over time they kind of blur together a little bit. But if we start on the left-hand side, one of the other kind of new economy business models we're seeing bubble up is around what's called the experience and lifestyle economy. And what that talks to is that, these days a growing number of companies are really trying to it's really all about get to know the customer, deliver them more than just a product, cater to the needs of their lifestyle, deliver them a unique experience. Which sounds like a simple thing to say, but often harder to do. The growing number of organizations that are moving in that direction have got, I would call it the trifecta of three things: community, content, commerce. So you start with nothing more complex than identifying a group of like-minded individuals. Maybe it's vacationing in California. Maybe it's interior decorating, as I experienced recently in Denver. Something of that nature. So you find the demographic you're looking for, you lay down a platform that lets them get together, and then you let them talk. So I'll give you an example. So I live in Colorado, as I mentioned. I'm just doing up I was doing up the main floor of my house. And one of my neighbors said, you should go and check this website out. It's a community that does, gives you guidance and advice, etc., on interior decoration. It was actually, interestingly enough, it was actually a site that was sponsored by the state of Colorado. So I jumped on the site and I said, look, here's what I'm trying to do with my 1,200 square feet on the main floor. And you get feedback from the participants. The participants are also consumers, but the participants are also businesses. So when the businesses see that I've got this project that I'm trying to do, they jump in, they provide guidance and advice to me on, hey, Andrew, have you thought about, products X, Y, Z, this approach, that approach? They were looking at what I needed. They were delivering me something that I would akin to a fairly unique experience, and they were catering to the needs of what I actually wanted in terms of the lifestyle in the main floor of my house. As a result, it was a great experience for me. I got the thing done. It was on time, under budget, and what I would say is that it was something I would never have got by flipping through a catalog or going into a bricks and mortar store. So it really worked well for me. What you can then do is the community's delivering a unique experience, but what you can then do logically is move from that to give the consumer, me in this particular case, the ability to greater build or co-create something of value with the business, right? So that moves you on to something called the co-creation economy. So a couple of examples. How many folks in the room have got kids? Most of you. So kids sneakers, right? Nike, Adidas, etc. They went out and said, look, what do you want? One of the survey says customization. I want to customize the heck out of my shoes. I don't want just like the vanilla stuff that comes off the shelf. I want to change every aspect of the shoe. Color, fabric, color of laces. I want my initials on it. I want it blinking with neon lights at nighttime. I want to go nuts. So you can now do that. You can literally now do that. I'm sure some of your kids have maybe tried that, maybe tried to put it on your credit card, and there's a big because you're not allowing them to do that, but they try. So that's an example. Think about Pepsi and Coke, similar thing. They ask their customers what they want. I want to be able to customize my drink for me, my friends, physically, virtually. The Apple and Google ecosystems, think about that for a second. There's co-creation in there, the app development with a shared revenue model. From an Intel perspective, I think about the maker community. You've got lots of capabilities and components that the maker community can just go nuts on. It's like opening Pandora's box in order to create something of value to the community and to the business. So lots of opportunities there for co-creation to deliver something unique to the consumer that they actually want, but done in conjunction with the business. Now, one of the things that you probably picked up on that is if you're a business and you want to give your customers the ability to customize so that they get the experience they want and drive more business, you have to have a very modular approach to the things that you make. So the third one here is called the circular economy, and it's based on a couple of very simple principles. Modular approach to the things that you make, sustainability is a big part of it, and material reuse. Now, the collective of those things, first of all, allows you as the business to get more products to market faster for less money. Also, that collective value proposition of modularity, sustainability, material reuse is a very compelling value proposition to the burgeoning middle class, which by some estimates will exceed 5 billion, with a B, people within the next 12 years or so, about 2028 if I recall correctly. And customers often say, well, why would I worry about that, Andrew? It's 12 years away from now. And I'm like, 5 billion people globally in the middle class with disposable income. By the way, the 5 billion people will have different wants and needs. So the 5 billion people, or the middle class in California might have different needs to the middle class in Shanghai, might have different needs to the middle class in, say, Canberra in Australia. So your ability as a business to cater those needs, I think, will be partly a defining line between whether you're successful or not. So when I do this with other customers, whether it's in an audience like this or in a personal setting, there's lots of scribbling of notes, there's lots of chatting, etc. And part of the reason is because it's not like any of us haven't heard of stuff like this before. Whether we recognize it as these different business models, I'm not sure, but we've heard of this stuff. But what has not happened is, as a business or as a government, have you actually internalized whether or not you should use any or all of these new economy business models as part of your plan and strategy for transformation of either the business or the state or local government? And the answer is usually no. I've heard about them, I see everything in the news about Uber, etc., but I've not taken on board whether any of that's applicable to me. And if you haven't, you should do, because I guarantee you that some of these things will disrupt you if you don't try and put your best foot forward. So I went through, what I was going to do there is going to go through some of these enablers or inhibitors of growth. I kind of skipped through the first two. That was the one around, the grow the business, new economy business models. The last one I alluded to there, folks, was the variability of the macroeconomic environment. I just put this up because I thought it was kind of interesting. It's really the impact that technology has on the kind of the growth and economic environment. If Moore's law, and I would hasten to add that that's not Andrew Moore's law, it's the real Moore, I'm not related. Again, if it was my Moore's law, I'd be on my island, looking at playing golf, drinking the single malt, etc. If Moore's law had slowed to every 3 years rather than 2, technology would only have advanced to 1998 levels. And this next one is like, smartphones would still be 9 years away. Oh my God, what would I do with smartphones? The world implodes. The commercial internet would still be in its diapers, and social media would still be a pipe dream. So it's just kind of an interesting look at the way that technology does affect the technology and the adoption of it. The next question I would pose is, so with all this disruption going on, Andrew, how are businesses responding to this? Businesses and government, for that matter. How are they responding to this world? And the term that I've used here, folks, is digital convergence. And what that really speaks to is convergence of traditional with digital. So it doesn't mean you lose sight of all the things that have made you successful as a government or as a large or small business. But what you have to do is blend it and fuse it with all of the attributes and characteristics that are required to become more of a digital business or an e-government. And I'm going to come on to what that looks like in a second. And I could literally go through every different industry, including government, and I'd give you examples of what that looks like and how some companies are starting to pursue it. But let me actually give you a couple of examples. I've got a government one, and I'll start with one of the customers that I have the good fortune to work with, BMW. I've been working with BMW for about the last 10 years or so now. And BMW are transforming themselves into what I would loosely categorize as a lifestyle brand. And you're like, they're a car company, right? What's a lifestyle brand? If you look at the first paragraph in their corporate strategy, it says something different, that BMW is going to become a leading provider of premium products and services for individual mobility. A leading provider of premium products and services for individual mobility. No mention of a car in there. So what are they doing to get to that? So, and this ties back to what I said before. Car sharing. In response to what's going on with Lyft and Uber, BMW about 2 years ago, and this actually applies in California, they were the first of the car companies to start looking at, the sharing model. So in, I think it's now 28, 30 cities between Europe and North America, you can have access to a BMW. More or less any BMW you want. So it's a nice sunny day here in Sacramento. Let's have a nice convertible and drive around with, the boombox going and, my baseball cap turned backwards and, it's all good. At the weekend, I've got responsibilities. I need to take the kids, somewhere, etc. So maybe I need an SUV. So in the last 2 years or so, they've been piloting this. It's been successful. Number one, they're making money on it, so that's good. Number two, as you will appreciate, they're learning a lot about their customers as they do it. Obviously, opt-in, privacy, etc. But they're learning a lot about their customers, which is very important. All roads lead to data. Data lets you help understand what the customer wants and doesn't want, likes and doesn't like. So they're being successful with their version of how they're actually approaching this shared economy model. Others are following. So Audi's doing it, Ford's doing it, Hyundai's doing it. So everybody's sort of starting to catch up. BMW were the first, but it was really in response to the disruption being caused by Uber, Lyft, etc. Sustainability and reuse. I talked about that in the context of the circular economy, modularity, sustainability, etc. The I-Series cars, you see a picture of an i8 in the middle there. They're the carbon fiber vehicles, the electric vehicles. They are manufactured in a LEED Platinum certified factory that's entirely powered by wind and solar. Obviously, the carbon fiber is of a reusable material context, so lots of sustainability in there. What it's allowing BMW to do is, as I said before, get more products to market faster for less money. And you can see that when you go into their catalog. They've got just a dizzying array of options that you've now got as the consumer. So they're actually starting to use this circular economy model as a vehicle, no pun intended, but as a vehicle to get more products to market faster for less money. Number three. They have done a lot of work on analytics. Some of it's obviously, I've mentioned it at the top there, but they have been able to, whether it's, the point where you're actually starting to think about buying a car or sharing a car or having access to a car, all the way through to the experience you get when you actually pick it up or you actually share it. They have done a lot of work on, what do we, not just gathering the data, but perhaps more importantly, what do I do with it once I've got it? And that's usually an issue that most customers I talk to have. It's not like you don't know that you have to do something with the analytics, but it's the what and how that people tend to struggle with. So I think they've done a nice job on taking the data and figuring out what kind of experience can we use the data to deliver to my customers, either existing customers or new ones that we're trying to attract. On the top right there, you've got the design cycle, and there's two sides to that particular coin. There's the actual design of the vehicle itself, which, as most of you know, traditionally is based on something called clay modeling. So you've got the clay model, you kind of tweak it, iterate it, takes time, costs money. 65% of BMW's design and testing cycle, I beg your pardon, is now done digitally. It's called ray tracing. And again, that ties back into some of the things that I said before about time to market, more cars, more options, faster to market for less money. The flip side of that is on the consumer side. When you go up to, not just BMW's website, but literally any car configurator these days, you've got like a dizzying array of options that allows you to co-create, to some extent, customize the car for you, far beyond just the color of the paint, the type of the rims, etc., etc. You can go down to almost the most minute detail now. I think the last part that I think is interesting is like the platform for service delivery. So most of us have got, in the head unit, you've got, a different experience. The head unit of old used to be a very binary experience, get you from A to B, that's pretty much it, played you some tunes and, job done. Nowadays, the head unit's an entirely different proposition. It becomes a platform for service delivery. The thing I think is interesting about this, folks, is that based on what BMW know about their customers, the data, what they like, what they don't like, etc., what services, capabilities, features can they deliver to their customers, either services, features, capabilities that they develop themselves, or increasingly that partners that they work with can develop and deliver through the head unit to the customer in a revenue stream manner. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to reach the customer, deliver incremental value in services, etc. So when asked the question, who is BMW? Are they a car company, a manufacturer, a retailer, a financial services company, a service provider, a cloud provider? You think about all the data that's coming up from the analytics they get, and the answer is yes. They are all of those things. So BMW, I think, is a good example of a company that's transforming. They would tell you themselves that they're just getting started. And the way I look at, when you look at digital transformation, often I'm asked, so when am I done? And I'm like, without being impolite, I'm like, if you think you're done, you're probably done. Right? This is not something that you check off at the end of the year and say, okay, job done, where do I get my paycheck? This is an ongoing thing. You have to be constantly moving the thing forward, constantly disrupting yourself. I think they've done a good job so far. the next slide I think is kind of interesting because it was BMW's 100th birthday about maybe a month or so ago, and I picked this up online at the briefing, and I think it just gives you a sense of where they're headed with this. So from their chief executive, Herr Kruger, we're leading BMW into a new era, leveraging innovative technologies, comprehensive connectivity, and zero-emission mobility in an industrialized and sustainable manner. So ties back to a lot of the stuff I was talking about, the new economy business models. And this last one I think is interesting. Nothing about the car company in here. The value creation shifting from the actual hardware towards software and services. This is BMW. You'd normally expect them, we all know them as the ultimate driving machine, but as they transform, that's different, right? So I think that's kind of interesting what they're trying to do. If I think about kind of a government example, yeah.
Do you think it's their leader who's saying we're getting distracted? I mean, this is a big change for this kind of company.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is it coming from the top or
Yeah,
fear-based kind of? Because
yeah.
they see what Uber and Lyft.
Ultimately, the change has to be driven from top down. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the chief executive is the one that has the epiphany to start with. It could be him, some of his or her management team, which I think was the case in BMW. The board members realized that there was a lot of stuff going on. But, from the top down, certainly in BMW's case, Kruger is driving an unprecedented level of change and transformation. And I think whether you're government or business, it's absolutely crucial that the top of the food chain is the one that is institutionalizing that change. It's difficult to do it from a bottoms-up perspective. Ultimately, that's important, but it also has to come from top down. And I think they would tell you that the stuff that they're going through is not easy. Because frankly, if this stuff was easy, we'd have done it a long time ago, right? But, like I said before, I know how the movie ends if you do nothing at all. If all you do is just have a bunch of, it's like board meetings every week. Everybody gets in the room. Yep, I think we need to change. Market's changing around us. Okay, good. Fast forward a week. They're back. Let's put some bullets on a whiteboard. Okay, we're aligned. We need to change. Good. Fast forward another week. Yep, okay, the bullets are still there. Yep, we're changing. Like, if that's all you do, if all you do is talk about it and actually don't do anything material to change it, the movie ends badly. So I'm being a bit flippant about it, but it's a genuine issue for big business and government, right? The one here is kind of interesting, Estonia. I think most of you have probably heard of Estonia. It's near the Baltic Sea in Europe, near Finland. They have done a pretty good job, I think, on starting their journey of transformation. So in Estonia, you can vote in elections from the comfort of your own home. You can fill in your tax returns in 5 minutes. You can sign legally binding documents over the internet anywhere in the world using your mobile phone. If you're an entrepreneur, you can set up a business in less than 20 minutes. You can get real-time access to vital company, property, and legal information. You can even integrate your secure services with ones that are provided to you by the government. And in their case, the relationship between government departments in Estonia and between government and citizens, small and large businesses, has been completely transformed. Bureaucracy is essentially a thing of the past. And what's interesting, obviously the government's running itself quite efficiently. And when you look at the economic numbers, is the Estonian government, and Estonia as a country, is I think now it was either number 1 or 2. I think now it's number 2 fastest growing country in the European Union. And again, they would tell you that they're not done. They're still working on it, but you can see some of the characteristics around here. The fact that they use things like keyless signature infrastructure, which is kind of an implementation of blockchain, so that type of stuff. So they're very technologically progressive. I would also say that the history of Estonia is not long, at least not in terms of what we have elsewhere, perhaps in America as well. So they've not had perhaps as much legacy to deal with as others. And I realize that legacy, it's good, but it can also be a bit of a constraining factor in terms of the pace that you can actually change with. But a good example, I think, in terms of a government that's actually making some real progress on transforming to be much more of a digital and e-government. Now, the final piece here. What this all speaks to, folks, I think is, what I've called here, with all this stuff going on, is the inevitable shift to digital. But what does this mean? It's one of those things that people talk about all the time, like, let's do digital. I'm like, well, what on earth does that mean? Could somebody please enlighten me? Here's a viewpoint based on my travels and my observations. I'm not suggesting it's the right viewpoint, but it's a viewpoint nonetheless. So a digital business or an e-government, I believe, has 6 characteristics or tenets or attributes, depending on what you want to call them. Number one, it needs to be data-driven. Like I said before, all roads lead to it at some way, some point in time these days. It's become the raw material for the information age. And if you do that properly, the business outcome, not IT problem, but the business outcome that it should deliver is to help you transform your business or government with trusted real-time data. So that's number one. Number two is the need to drive either operational excellence or revenue growth via extended insights by being part of the smart world. Now, under the covers of that, there's some IoT, but I didn't say IoT for a reason. And the reason I didn't say IoT is because what I see a lot in my travels is, I would call it a very outside-in view of it. Lots of science experiments. Let me throw a bunch of sensors on a wall and wait for something magic to happen. It's going to be great, right? And I see that all the time. I'm like, that's not the way you need to look at it. You have to figure out what you want to do, first of all. Take an inside-out view, not an outside-in view. And fundamentally, when it comes to IoT, if it's not either a need to drive either operational excellence, safety, security, etc., and or revenue growth, what are you doing it for? Enough with the science experiments. Figure out what you want to do. The technology is there to do it, but you have to figure out as a business or government what you wanted to do for you in the first place, as opposed to throw some stuff on the wall and wait for the magic wand to be waved and poof, it's all good. So that's number two. Number three is the need to be an on-demand business or government. In other words, you need to be able to deliver services, capabilities to your customers, partners, citizens, etc. in record time. And I don't mean weeks and months. I literally mean minutes and hours, because if you don't do it, somebody else will. And they'll probably do it better, faster, and cheaper than you. And in that case, you're the one that's on the back foot. You're being disrupted, not doing the disrupting. That's number three. Number four, we were having a conversation about this yesterday. Number four really ties into every single one of these, but I wanted to call it out specifically, because if I didn't, somebody would call me on it. Number four is about being trusted. Like I said, I think earlier on, trust is at the very heart of your brand identity. Brand as a government, brand as a business, large or small. And as I said to a team yesterday, trust is one of those things that is won in drips and lost in buckets, right? It takes a long time to develop it. It can go in the blink of an eye. And if you lose your customers' or citizens' trust, you lose a lot more than just revenue, okay? It's a non-trivial task. It's a hard thing to do. There's no such thing as an easy button, but that's a huge imperative. If you do it properly, it should help you significantly reduce your business risk or your exposure and protect your brand value, either as government or business, with security and privacy. Number five is all about the customer, whether it's the end customer or the consumer or the citizen. And it's all about delivering an experience, because I was talking a bit about that before. Delivering, based on what you know about them, opt-in privacy, etc., deliver a properly connected, immersive, but safe and secure experience to your citizens, to your customers, and to your partners. And that comes back to the data, all roads lead to data, etc., and what you decide to do with it. The last one, I think, is probably one of the cornerstones of it all, and it's about having an innovative and productive workforce, and that talks to talent. Every business and government that I talk to wants to be more innovative, right? Best products, quality service requires best innovation, but you can't just become innovative. It's not like we get all of us in a room and we all kind of squeeze really hard and we get an epiphany. That'd be nice and easy. The roof would probably go off the building here with all the brain power that we have in the room. And I'm being funny about it, but you can't just become innovative. And yes, today we've got things like the human cloud, agile working, swarming, etc., which is helping to shrink the innovation and productivity gap. But ultimately, it comes down to your ability to attract, develop, and retain the best talent across the different generational gaps, not just millennials. And that's a hard thing to do, especially if you're an established business. So Intel, by the way, are going through that too. If you're a graduate, you walk into a sea of grey cubes, guess what you do? Turn around, run as fast as you can out the door. You don't want to work there. And again, I'm being funny about it, but every board of executives that I talk to, it's a big concern. Because if you can't get the right talent in your organization, it will hold you back in terms of doing any of the other stuff. So I know it's a genuine concern for us. We are trying to do a lot of that with attracting new talent, diversification of the employee base, etc. I know that that's something that you all are considering as well. How do you attract, develop, and retain the best talent for the next wave of innovation in the state of California? So the other thing I'd point out here, folks, is that these are all interlinked. These are not separate. These are not silos. They have a multiplicative effect. And what I try and advise customers to do is don't look at these in isolation. Don't say, I'm the cloud person, and then I'm the person that thinks about data, and then I'm the person that thinks about security. That happens more than you might imagine. You can't afford to do that because there's a multiplicative effect. If you do it, your returns on this will be suboptimal. Your path to progress will be constrained. What I then do, and I realize how am I doing on time here?
When you were talking about trust, was that specific to data security, or was it about like technology breaches, or is it about
All of
investment in technology?
I think it really covers everything. I think it really covers every aspect of trust, privacy, security, regulation, compliance, like physical data sovereignty, that type of thing. So it really it's one box, but it's if you peel back the onion there are multiple layers to it. It's a big, complex. Now, it's probably one of the top one or two things that I see customers wrestling with. They wish they had the easy button, but it permeates through every aspect of the business. What I would also say is, when I think about trust, and I said before, it's one of those things that's won in drips and lost in buckets. Technology is good, but also, you have to have the way I kind of characterize it is like, you need, our people are our strongest line of defense in some respects. So you have to have, and we do this a lot in Intel, have a security-minded culture. Help your employees help you. So I think security isn't a bolt-on or an add-on. It's not just a product or a feature. Security should be in the DNA of everything you do as an organization. And again, that's easy for me to say, and we all kind of get it intellectually and philosophically, but actually doing it and institutionalizing it inside a company or a government agency is quite hard, which is partly why it's such a difficult thing to do. A lot of people try and, it's like the old whack-a-mole thing, spend their way out of the problem. I'll buy a thing that'll fix this and then for that, and then before you know it, you've got certainly a very sub-optimized security posture. You spent a bunch of money for what? A bunch of products, and you're playing whack-a-mole. So it's a hard thing, but I think that the cultural aspect of having a security-minded culture in the DNA of your people it's often overlooked because we think that technology is going to fix it. But if you can't help the people change, throwing the technology at the problem is not going to help them at all, right? So what I not normally do, and I'm sensitive to time here, I talked about the 6 digital business attributes, right? And usually in a longer session, which is maybe something we can do at a future date if you'd like, I spend some time on every single one and say a little bit more to give you a perspective on what's really going on in each. So let me kind of go through one of them, and then I'll kind of close out. So this is the digital business attribute around being more data-driven, all roads lead to data, etc. So these are just some examples of just some general uses, what we see leaders doing in this particular space. So a lot of work that you see happening here is around the need for personalization, contextualization, etc. So examples might be sentiment analysis, location-aware ad placement, buyer protection programs, risk management, fraud management, things of that nature. Lots on operational efficiency and safety, which I know will be of a big concern, big focus in the state of California. So logistics planning, transportation traffic management, defect analysis, patient safety, others. Democratization of analytics, which is essentially make it available to the masses, from boardroom to back office to end customer, or to your citizens for that matter. Democratize the analytics. Obviously, keep in mind that you have to protect it, but you should give access to the masses to it. The last one is around the idea of having data as a service, again, whether you're a small business, large business, or a state or local government. And what that talks to really, what that gets to is we've all got data, probably more data than we know what to do with, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But where I find a lot of folks struggling is what to do with it. So at this point in a conversation, I'll just ask some basic, what look like fairly basic questions, right? So given what I just said, have you figured out where you're going to derive maximum value from the data that you have access to? And you would be amazed, maybe, how often a room of executive goes quite quiet. Because it's not like they don't know they have to do it, because it's big and important, right? But they haven't figured out what are my top 10 use cases that will help me as a business or a government derive or deliver the maximum value to my constituents, my citizens, my customers, my partners. The second thing I often ask is, do you have a strategy for big data that you can articulate to me, like the elevator pitch? And by the way, the answer is not Hadoop or something like that. You know, that's a tool, right? It's a capability, but that's not your strategy. So what is it? And again, you'd be amazed how often you hear crickets chirp, because it's not like people don't know they have to do it, but it's like, you know, I get that I have to do it intellectually, philosophically, but the what and the how, I'm struggling with it. And lastly there, and these are just some sample questions, I've got others, but maybe what's holding you back? If you've not got a strategy, if you're not quite sure where to, you know, derive the value, is it because you haven't got the right skills? So maybe you need data scientists, so mathematicians, statisticians, that type of thing. Is it legacy? Is it lack of management support? Is it concerns about privacy, etc.? So I typically try and use this as a conversation. Think of this in a workshop context. It helps me figure out where the customer's at and helps Intel figure out how might we help you move down this path faster than you are right now. So talk a little bit about what's going on, and then, and I'll close out in just a couple of minutes, I say, look, what do we see? Where's the puck going? So 2, 3, 4 years from now, where are things moving? So you get some future-proofing and a view of the market going forward. So a lot of what we're seeing on data hubs, so that's gathering and aggregating data from multiple different sources. I use the example of the Hamburg Port Authority. It's one of the largest port authorities in the world, I think, and they gather and aggregate data from multiple sources: retail, transportation, logistics, maritime, weather, etc. So the Port Authority and the literally thousands of partners that are part of it have this mountain of data that they can analyze, synthesize, make decisions based on it, real-time decisions. As a result, the Port Authority in Hamburg is one of the most efficiently run port authorities anywhere in the world because they're basing their decisions on real information versus guesswork. The second one there, obviously, this is a big, big area: machine learning, artificial intelligence. Kind of a funny example. Google voice recognition obviously uses artificial intelligence. When Siri came out, it wouldn't recognize my accent, which is, you know, and not just mine, but just in Scotland in general. There was, you know, civil war, you know, uproar in Scotland because, you know, I'd say, where's the nearest Walmart? And it would say, the pharmaceutical department's like 6 miles down the road. And you know, it was using a rudimentary version of machine learning at the time, which just clearly didn't recognize my accent. I switched to Google and Android, it now does, so I'm happy about that. The other one, just that funny example, Netflix. So how many people watch House of Cards, right? Most everybody watches House of Cards. By most measures, it's been a big success. Netflix, instead of doing the usual kind of pilot audience acceptance testing stuff, they used machine learning in its entirety to identify that kind of drama, a political drama full of backstabbing politicians, etc., would be a success, even down to the point where they identified Kevin Spacey, Robin Wright as the lead actor and actress and the person that does the directing. So I think that was kind of interesting. They used machine learning to do it. They then, if you've seen Orange is the New Black, applied it to that, which is a completely different genre, but also very successful. So that's advancing at an incredible rate right now. And obviously, analytics are obviously moving to the cloud in fairly rapid order. Now, one more slide, and it's a few down here, so let me kind of go through this. This will give you the sense of all the other stuff that I can cover, all these 6 digital business attributes. But I wanted to ask you, or leave you with some questions to think about at the end. And it's coming up in just a second. Closing thoughts, there we go. So some questions for you folks. So the first one, compared to 12 months ago, things are changing fast. Based on what I've just said, it looked like, you know, people were like nodding their heads. It's like, you know, kind of get where you're coming from. What have you done differently to last year? Is it still, you know, bullets on a whiteboard, but still on the same whiteboard, the same bullets that you had 12 months ago? Hopefully not. Hopefully progress has been made. If not, what gives, right? The second one I find interesting, who's driving it, right? Is it IT? Is it departments? Combination of both? Hopefully, yes. And also, and I think very importantly, are you all on the same page? And the reason I say that is quite specific. I do workshops with, you know, some of these, you know, board of executives from time to time. And the one I did most recently, actually, chief executive was there, you know, his entire executive team was there, and they had a nice shiny document on the table that says digital transformation. Great. I'm like, this is excellent. At the end of it, he stood up and said, you know, that was awesome. You know, that was really, you know, very enlightening, very progressive, helped me understand how you can help us in a material way. It also told me, Andrew, we as a management team are not on the same page. We've all got different versions of the truth. That's not a good thing. If you all look at transformation through a different lens, it's not going to help you. You have to be on the same page. So that's, preaching to the choir, I'm sure, but, that's an important piece of it. I talked about the new economy business models. Are you incorporating or looking at any or all of them as part of your plans to change the way that the state of California looks at delivering differentiated services to its citizens, partners, businesses, etc.? If no, then maybe that should be something to think about. And then the last thing is, and I know that, you are shifting to an e-government model, perhaps faster than others, but are you encountering any hurdles as you go through that? And usually the answer is yes. Are they cultural, organizational? And like I said, the technology stuff's there, but if you can't help the people change, throwing technology at the problem won't make any difference. So cultural, organizational, technological, social, political, others. Just some questions to think about and ponder as I thank you for your time and your attention, and I close out the session. So thank you.